Okay, council, it's 7 o'clock. I call this meeting to order. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Up next, we have a roll call. Tell you what.
I just changed it. Try it again.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Martinez?
All councilors present and a quorum has been declared.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the agenda approval.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Up next on the agenda is citizen comment. This is the segment of the agenda to where those who have filled out comment cards, I will call your name and ask you to come up to the podium to make your comments. We do limit all comments to 3 minutes. If you're still speaking at the 3-minute mark, I will politely ask you to end the conversation at that time so we can go to the next person. We'll start off with the audience here first, and then we'll go on to Zoom. The first one is Shayna.
All right. I have a perfectly good explanation for this hat. Okay, this came from one of your librarians yesterday celebrating Mushroom Day. And I want to remind you that mushrooms are safe. Mushrooms are from the earth and they are whimsical. Don't take this so seriously. Y'all have to remember that people have been using mushrooms for health for many years. I'm sorry. My name is Shanna, and I do live here in Alamosa, Colorado, Shanna McCrae. I'm here because of the Proposition 122 that was passed in November of 2022. I had a group of individuals that helped author the bill come down and do a question and answer. I invited many of you, invited a lot of people around the county. Not many people attended. And that was a great way for y'all to get immediate answers about what the bill's intentions were. So in keeping with that, I would like to offer y'all some information to where y'all can go and stay in that vein of what the bill intended. On the nonprofit side, if you go to healingadvocacyfund.org, they're going to give you some great information. Cultivation facilities and home-based services, those are also part of the abilities of people that have the therapists. They can go to their homes and do it in the comfort of their own homes. So whether or not you license facilities in, different zoned areas, just know that people have the option of doing it from the comfort of their own home with their therapists, okay? So it'll happen no matter where it's zoned and if facilities exist. The therapist will be able to go to people's houses and facilitate their trips there. I also want to point you to YouTube. You can look up any of the TED Talks by a gentleman named Paul Stamets. He is a mycologist. He's very famous. He's got a lot of information about the safety and efficacy of therapeutic mushroom use. Also on YouTube, you can look up 9 News. It's a Denver station that did an article, an inside look at what happens with mushroom therapy. Like we were talking about in Oregon, there's a lot of online information about what those facilities look like. They are clinical in setting. It is medicinal. It's not people just having fun and losing their minds, okay? They're losing addictions and losing prescriptions. So Thank y'all. If you have any other questions, you can find me and I'll be glad to help point information. I don't know everything, but I want to learn it and I want to help facilities and therapists get their licensure here. So
Thank you.
thank y'all.
Thank you. The next card I have is Ruthie Brown.
Good evening, Ruthie Brown here. My first question is, I know you're going to have a work session on October 23rd about the potential of a second homeless shelter. And hearing how all your Wednesdays are filling up, will you have a work session where the public can speak? That you can figure that out. But listening to mushrooms, I'd like to tell you about my sister. We went this summer from police, ambulances, suicide watch, hospitals, back home, ambulances, police, hospital stays, committed, trying to commit suicide with a rock in a hospital. And we were desperate. We had no idea what was going on, depression, anxiety. It was, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And when it came time to finding something that would help, it is all across the board. Hypnosis, ketamine, mushrooms. And you guys really need to get educated on this because the whole mushroom part of it, as I understand it, it's not about getting high. It's about connecting your brain waves to make them work again or focus again or something. But we were able to get mushrooms for my sister from a couple of places. And her husband went on YouTube, and it was microdoses. There was nothing connected to being high or going on a trip or being crazy. It was about healing. And so when you talk about limiting hours, we're talking people that need help here, whether it's a veteran with PTSD or suicidal thoughts or whatever's going on, as it was with my sister. We had family fly in from all across the country to do whatever we could. So keep an open mind that way. It's not a party. It's not loud music. It's not, someone could drive up to your house and go into your house and have mushrooms in a spare bedroom. And that's all. That's all it is. And kids aren't, I don't believe kids, if you have the licensing or the ID checks and all that type of stuff, but it really isn't anything to be afraid of. And Paul Stamets, like she says, he's the king of mushrooms, but for years. And just get educated before you start making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we're gonna go to, since I don't have any other comment cards, we're gonna go to the Zoom participants. And Ms. Martinez, if you don't mind, can you give them instructions on how to raise their hand so that we can recognize those people?
Yes, sir. If you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for public hearing, you'll use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you're going to push *9. Mayor, I don't see anyone choosing to raise their hand.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martinez. I don't see any hands raised either, so we'll go ahead and close the comment section, but turn it over to staff for follow-up and to any comments that were made tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. To Ms. Brown's request to be able to have time for the public to provide any input, especially as it relates to the work session on October 23rd, when we continue the discussion for the soup kitchen / low barrier shelter. About mid-year, City Council did change its work sessions to where we are now recording them, we're providing them through Zoom. And then we are trying to make every effort to allow public comment at the end of the work session. We ran out of time for this one, unfortunately, but it will be continuing in November for a continued work session, which will
allow time for public comment at that time as well. So I do want to assure the public that that work session on October 23rd, we won't run out of time because there's not a regular meeting scheduled at 7. So the meeting can take as long as it needs to take, and it will allow for public comment. We do limit the public comment to the 3 minutes, similar to what we do in a regular meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that information was provided.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sanchez. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. We have ceremonial items. We have 2 proclamations tonight. And on City Council, we usually share in reading these proclamations. The first proclamation is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's going to be read tonight by Councilor Jackie Vigil. And do we have anyone here in the audience who's here for this proclamation? If so, please feel free to come up to the podium right there. If you would like to say a few brief comments, feel free to do so. And then Councilor Jackie Vigil will read the proclamation and we'll come down and present it to you, okay?
So my name is Megan Lang. I'm the TUCASA Program Director. This is Janine Hiron. She's my victims advocate. We work under the TUCASA program, which provides services for adult survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So nationally, October is recognized as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we just wanted to bring this proclamation to you guys today and invite you to a couple events that we've got going on throughout the month in honor of DVAM. Primarily, Thursdays are Wear Purple Thursday. So if you have any purple in your closet, we encourage you to wear it on Thursdays in honor of survivors and those who have lost their lives to domestic violence. If you look in the little swag bags that we gave, there might be a purple ribbon in there as well. In case you don't own purple, you can just pin it on. 2 of our other large events going on October 17th, we're having a lunch and learn. So every month we partner with behavioral health. We have a community partner, a member of our staff present to the community. It's free, free lunches included. There's just a RSVP that we request so we can make sure there's enough food. But this month will be about Domestic Violence Awareness Month and its history. We're going to be doing some fun activities. So I don't know if you've seen little painted rocks around town before with TUCASA information on it. But we paint rocks as a staff with our hotline information and supportive messages for survivors, and we place them around town and throughout the valley. We've had survivors pick those rocks up and call us before and say, we'd never heard of you. So we're going to invite our community to make those rocks with us this year. We'll also be making some luminarias for our annual Light Up the Night event, which will be held on October 24th of this year at Colt Park, right over here under the West Pavilion. That is another event that we do in honor of survivors and those who have lost their lives to domestic violence. It's a candlelight vigil. We generally have a survivor speaker join us for the evening. We take a moment of silence to remember our survivors, and we drop flowers in the Rio Grande River in honor of them. So we would love to have you guys join us on those 2 events. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you so very much. Did you have anything that you wanted to say?
No, it's just, we would really like to see as many people come out to light up the night. It's a very important event to us, and we'll have ASCU Samba group performing, so there'll be some drinks and some cookies. So definitely come out and join us.
Thank you. So Councilor Jackie Vigil is going to read the proclamation and then all of us will come down and present it to you.
The City of Alamosa Proclamation Domestic Violence Awareness Month. October has been nationally recognized as Domestic Violence Awareness Month since 1989, with the intention of calling attention to the fact that domestic violence is widespread and impacts every community. This year, DVAM campaign theme, Heal, Hold, and Center, calls on communities to work together, embrace the many cultural ways we can heal from violence and oppression, commit to holding space for survivors, and center those most marginalized in all of our efforts to end domestic violence. As we heal, hold, and center survivors, especially those navigating systems of oppression, we remain grounded to the knowledge that there is no survivor justice without social justice. Whereas the marginalization of certain groups in society, including undocumented individuals, transgender individuals, individuals of color, and people living with disabilities, increase their vulnerability to domestic violence. Whereas all survivors deserve access to culturally responsive programs and services to increase their safety and self-sufficiency. Whereas all communities deserve access to culturally responsive prevention programs and initiatives to improve overall community health and safety by challenging the societal norms that perpetuate violence. Whereas although progress has been made toward preventing and ending domestic violence and providing support to survivors and their family, important work remains to be done. Now therefore, Ty Coleman, Mayor of the City Council of Alamosa, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2024 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Further, in recognition of the essential work done by survivors, domestic violence programs and services, I urge all citizens to actively participate in scheduled activities and programs sponsored by Casa Inc. and other esteemed community organizations to work towards elimination of intimate partner violence.
Thank you, Counselor Jackie Villa. We'll come down and present it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Counselor Jackie Villa, for reading the proclamation. The next proclamation, I will be reading it. It's the Fire Prevention Week proclamation. Chief, did you want to come up? And is there anyone else in the audience here for this proclamation? If so, feel free to accompany our Chief Stone.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for taking the time to acknowledge the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association week of, there's a theme every year, and this year it happens to be smoke detectors. I don't want to steal all your thunder with what you're going to be reading about, but I will just say a few things about smoke alarms. 96% of the homes in the US have smoke alarms, but 20% of those have non-working alarms. Typically, that's batteries. So batteries, sometimes people, I'm sure we've all been there where it goes off, it's chirping in the middle of the night, and you yank that battery out, right? Well, yank it out and then find another and replace it while you're there. Make it easy, because you just never know. Some people have smoke detectors that are hooked up into their hardwired of their home, and then they have the battery as a backup. If you take that battery out and you're just hooked up to the hardwire within the home and there's a power outage, then you're playing the game in the roulette wheel. So things that we don't want to do, right? So when the battery goes out, get it replaced. If you're in a position or a condition that you are unable to change that battery out, give us a call. We often go to residents and do just that. We change batteries quite often. About 2/3 of home fire deaths occur in homes without smoke alarms. And the risk of dying in a home fire is cut in half in homes with smoke alarms. So all of this is really pretty simple. Nowadays, just about every home has one or more. You should have one in each of the bedrooms, in a hallway, and on each floor. And if you test them once a month, just press that little button, hold your ears, or have somebody do that. You'll go to bed knowing that you're being protected, because while you're asleep, those things stay awake. And when we do fire prevention uh, activities for young kids in October, that's one of the things we always tell them. We get down in a crouch, and we get down at their level, and we say, hey, what stays awake while you're asleep? And then they don't know. And then we tell them about the smoke alarm, and then we press the button, it gets loud, and they get all excited. That's the stuff that we really enjoy doing, but it's applicable to adults as well. Those things stay awake, but they'll only stay awake when they're properly outfitted with power, being a battery or hooked up to the home. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Mayor Coleman.
Thank you very much, Chief. Fire Prevention Week Proclamation. Whereas the city of Alamosa is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk of from fire. And whereas home fires killed more than 2,700 people in the United States in 2022, according to the National Fire Protection Association. And fire departments in the United States responded to 360,000 homes fires. And whereas roughly 3 out of 5 fire deaths happens in homes with either no smoke alarm or with no working smoke alarm. Whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires almost in half. And whereas smoke alarms sense smoke well before you can, alerting you to danger in the event of a fire in which you may have as little as 2 minutes to escape to safety. And whereas Alamosa residents should install smoke detectors and smoke alarms in every sleeping room, outside each separate sleeping area, and on every level of the home. And whereas Alamosa residents will make sure their smoke alarms meet the needs of all their family members, including those with sensory and physical disabilities. And whereas Alamosa residents should test smoke alarms at least once a month. Whereas residents who have planned and practice a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas Alamosa's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection and education. And whereas Alamosa residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas in 2024 Fire Prevention Week theme, smoke alarms, make the theme work for you, serves to remind us the importance of having working smoke alarms in the home. Now therefore, I, Ty Coleman, Mayor of Alamosa, do hereby proclaim October the 6th through 12th, 2024 as Fire Prevention Week throughout the city. And I urge all the people of Alamosa to make sure their homes have working smoke alarms and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of Alamosa Fire and Emergency Services, given under my hand and seal of the City of Alamosa in Colorado on the second day of October, 2024.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Council.
We'll bring it down and present it to you.
Okay.
Chief. Thank you, council. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, consent calendar A. Council Vio?
Mayor, I move that we approve consent calendar A.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, board commissions of business, annual update from the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee.
Mayor Coleman and council, thank you for the opportunity to update you on what the doings of the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee have been over the last year. What I'm passing out is the proposed interpretive sign that will go with the clock that was installed last Thursday, or dedicated last Thursday, installed on Wednesday, I guess. A good example to me of historic designation and activities in Alamosa. It's going to be right there in the, almost the middle of the sidewalk. Anybody coming down is going to see it. Unique as can be, unique to Alamosa, which I think makes it even more of a feather in our cap. Hopefully at our next meeting, early part of next month, we will agree to ask council to designate it historically, look to add that to, I think it's about 23 different properties that are designated currently here in Alamosa. And as a volunteer in the Welcome Center, I'd love to be able to give somebody a copy of our historic walking tour while their car is sitting there charging, as something to do after I suggest they go up to Milagros and get coffee. The clock is unique, as I say, and it's unique to Alamosa. It was used by the railroaders to set their timepieces. It was, of course, right there, a block away from the railroad station. It must have been electrified at one time, because one of the stories that was put out about it that BHA was able to find talked about it catching on fire, and we could not find a staff person on the city payroll that was willing to come and wind it every 8 days. So it's been electrified, and every 8 days should tell the clock to wind pull the chains for the weights back up. Anyway, it's right out there on Main Street. We're very pleased with it. As you know, last May was Historic Preservation Month. We do this once a year. We take a whole month because we're so important. And we have been very pleased that the city has been willing to sign that proclamation. We like to show it to people and say, you know, this has been designated. Our local newspaper, the Courier, has been very good about putting articles on historic buildings in during that month. I think we had 4 of them in last May. Love to have people assist like that. This thing that I just sent around, you'll notice on the far right side, it lists volunteers and people that were connected with saving the clock. And I'm pleased that there were that many people actively involved in the valley in helping to save our historic structure. That sure gave me joy to know that BHA was able to find that many people. If you saw the Alamosa Citizen, you might have seen the picture of her painting the clock with a very little brush to fill in a spot that had not been picked up by her brush. Our city employees over and beyond, definitely more than one step beyond what is required. I'm pleased that the council designated Zapata Park as Zapata Historic. park. I love telling people that Alamosa is the birthplace of school desegregation. It was something that was important to my family. And when Brown versus Board of Education was founded, I came out of high school and looked, and there was my mother down at the curb in the car. She said it was just passed by the Supreme Court 9-0. We're going to a Tigers ball game. And that was the way she celebrated that historic moment. A newest member on our committee, Joe Aldrich, is working on the old county courthouse. And he said that a maximum price guarantee has been established, stating that the construction will cost valley-wide about $12 million. That of course includes updating everything inside. Historic designation covers the outside of the building. The owner is pretty free to do what they want inside the building. They're going to put an elevator in it. They're going to connect the upper stair portion so that the center portion is connected to both the east and west wing. I just love to see people repurpose a building like that, keep it historic, keep it on the historic register, make it appropriate for their usage. There are monies from the state historic fund, as much as 30% of the cost of redoing the inside of a building to repurpose it to like put a roof on the buildings downtown, or Tuck Point, rock or the bricks on the alley side of the building, paid for partially by the historic preservation. Anyway, we've been active. I'm pleased with what we do. I'm pleased that council has seen fit, or maybe not given the opportunity to make another decision, to continue putting me back on the Historic Preservation Board. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's good. Okay. All right. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. Business brought forward by city staff, development services. First item is the second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 21-2024, an ordinance amending the Unified Development Code to change the definition of temporary signs, to modify the classification of real estate offices, and to add a table note requiring first floor businesses facing Main Street in the Central Business District to be open and a minimum number of hours per month.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So it's mostly as the name of this ordinance suggests. We are looking at some relatively minor changes to the UDC. They came as a recommendation from our Main Street Advisory Council. These are sort of nuisance items in our downtown that have come up meeting after meeting that we thought relatively minor changes to the code could address. So first and foremost is we're going to remove real estate offices from being basically the one office category that's exempt from the first floor facing Main Street rule. We generally don't allow offices on any of the first floor buildings or the first floor of any of the buildings facing Main Street downtown. And the only businesses that were exempt from that were real estate offices. Unfortunately, we've gotten some complaints that they don't keep regular office hours, they're closed a lot, and it doesn't create the vibrancy we want in our downtown, where we want people to be able to have experiences or dining or shopping in our central business district. And so we'd like to move real estate offices into our office category. We'd also like to set a minimum number of hours per month for businesses to be open, sort of to address those same concerns. So the number that staff came up with the help of Planning Commission and some feedback from council was 60 hours per month, which is about 2 days a week. Obviously, staff's willing to work with people if they're remodeling or if there's health issues. It's not a unilateral rule. It's just in the case that a business is sort of perpetually closed.
And then the final one is we have temporary banners downtown. They're usually vinyl. We did already have regulations in place to deal with them if they were tattered and worn, but we didn't have a definition of what temporary meant. And so no, temporary means 6 months. So you can't just always have a temporary banner up. And again, we're human beings in development services. We're happy to work with people. If you tell us that you have a sign and you're working on it and you're making progress, we're always happy to give extensions. I think the Purple Pig sign took 2 years with all the supply restrictions and all of the supply chain issues during COVID. And so they gave us a picture, said, this is what we're fabricating. And we just kept giving them extensions and working with them. And now Purple Pig has a beautiful sign. So those are the changes to the UDC, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, what we'll do, Ms. James, we'll go ahead and open it up for a public hearing, and then follow up with council. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing for ordinance number 21-2024. If we have anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments at this time regarding this ordinance, please come up to the microphone, state your name, and make your comments.
Ruthie Brown. I must be missing something. And I find it very hard to believe that a person can rent a building, maybe buy a building, and the city can tell them when they need to be open. What comes next? What is this the first step? And then I'm like, okay, I'm on State Avenue. I'm like in the 20-year plan. We already know that. But what gives you the right to? I know and I've talked to some people downtown today who said they have called in and totally disagree with this, but I just can't believe the audacity. Unless you were going to pay part of the mortgage or part of the rent, and I know real estate people, hey, if they're out working, they're out showing property, they're doing this, however they run their business is their business. It scares the heck out of me that you think this would be okay. And yet I can understand we want a vibrant whatever. It still doesn't give you the right to tell a private business person what to do. What can they sell in their store? Okay, now we don't want any real estate offices at all, so we need you to move. We've got someone else that wants to come in downtown. Where will it end? And I know 60, it's not about the 60 hours because that's pretty piddly, but it's just the point that if I were to rent a building or rent my building or sell it or whatever, I would never, ever, ever want to be told how many hours I have to be there. So I think it's a huge, and I guess my other question is, who's going to enforce that? Are we going to have a time clock on every door? So you punch a time clock when you go in and when you leave? And are there fines? Do we go to jail? If we only work 15 hours a week or less, is that along with this ordinance, or what's the penalties on this? Because I'd be real curious on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have anyone else in the audience who would like to make any comments before I go to the Zoom participants? Feel free to come up to the podium at this time. I will not be coming back to the audience after I go to the Zoom participants. So if you have any comments, this is the time to come up to the podium and make those comments. Okay, not seeing anyone moving that direction, so we'll go ahead and go to Zoom. Ms. Martinez, if you can give those participants instructions on how to raise their hand.
Yes, sir. If you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for this public hearing, you use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. Mayor, I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any hands raised either, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'll turn it back over to Ms. James before I turn it over to council, just in case she needs to respond to any comments.
I'm happy to address a couple of them. So this rule was sort of promulgated over months of debate within the Main Street Advisory Committee. So it really, truth be told, most of the regulations that come out of development services feel a little uncomfortable, like they're violating some private property rights, because we are regulating private property. And as the Main Street Committee really evaluated how they wanted to encourage their neighbors to keep business hours, they felt this was a relatively minor rule that, again, like some of our other rules in our downtown, is annoying, but doesn't necessarily hurt businesses. As far as enforcement, we are absolutely not keeping a time clock. This is just a tool in the toolbox for sort of a business owner that doesn't keep regular hours. We have some sort of guidelines that we can go talk to them. So I suppose if someone truly didn't keep any hours, we could involve code enforcement and they'd go through regular code enforcement proceedings. But really, it's really just to encourage people to start to keep business hours. We understand the rule's uncomfortable. It's just, it came from our Main Street Committee and they're really passionate about trying, because we have businesses that want properties downtown. And, you know, Kathy used to have a problem where, our economic development director used to have a problem where she had more buildings than she had bodies, and now she has more bodies than she has buildings. And I think the business owners downtown are just kind of frantically scratching their heads. How do we get more activation? How do we get a lot of reasons for people to stop downtown? And this was one of the solutions they came up with.
Thank you, Ms. James. And before I turn it over to council, could you give a description of the type of businesses that make up the Main Street Committee or the participants?
Yes, so we have representatives from the retail sector. We have representatives from food and hospitality. We have retail representatives. We have a representative from the chamber. We have a representative from Visit Alamosa. So we have a council person on our committee. So it's a pretty robust and diverse group of business owners from our downtown.
And I think, and property owners.
And property owners that don't actually run businesses or don't have to run businesses.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'll turn it over to council for any comments or motions. Councilor Jan Vigil.
Just a question on that, 60 hours a month. Have we had conversations with people or business owners down there before? Hey, could you keep your stores open longer or for different times of the day, stuff like that?
So it's really 2 days a week. So 60 hours a month is not, it's just, it's like 1.8 days per week per month. And so the only property owner that I got feedback from, I know Ms. Brown referenced hearing from business owners. The person that's reached out to me said that that was kind of a ridiculous, said that he also did not agree with us setting hours for private businesses, but did say that it was kind of a ridiculously low figure and that no one could stay in business operating less than 60 hours.
Did we, I think the question is more, have we reached out to the businesses that prompted the need for this change?
I did talk to one of them, but more their concern was their real estate office and the changes to real estate offices. The real estate offices that are already downtown will stay downtown. And I think their goal is to have office hours. So right now it's a one-person office and they don't have the income to justify having office staff to keep the business open. But it is where they're trying to move as a business. So that is one that I did talk to. I
Thank you.
suppose there's two others that I could reach out to.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilor Krebs and Councilor Hensley.
So I guess my question, Rachel, is how many businesses does that affect approximately? Ballpark.
The top of my head, I think there's only 2 businesses downtown that are active that are regularly closed.
Okay. Because as a counselor, I've received no communication or any complaints about this going through. There's no one in the audience to speak against it. So there's that input. And I don't see how someone could pay rent or their mortgage when they're closed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Cribb. Counselor Hensley?
So I'm the council member that's on the Main Street Board, and it definitely has been well discussed in regards to this. And also as a reminder that anybody who already has a business is grandfathered in. So it's more to continue to look ahead as the downtown continues to grow, is putting things into effect so that it grows and continues to stay vibrant versus keeping the status quo. So I guess I would just add that in. And so little things like anything, when you do a whole Main Street is then, and anything you would do, not just Main Street, but that idea of making some tweaks as it goes along.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Hensley. Counselor Dominguez?
I've read through this a few times and I think, in my opinion, I appreciate the downtown and how they usually bring most of our stuff to us, and I know they're hard at work, but I think on this one, I'm gonna have to represent everybody who does own a business, and I have owned businesses. And I wouldn't like if anybody told me when I should or shouldn't be open. And two, it just doesn't sound right to me anymore. The signs I can understand, because I know the city's good at working with people. If you can't get your sign, whatever, I know you guys are good at that, but I just see an overreach later maybe that could be hindering to people, and I don't think, there's times when I closed my business because I've had to for funerals, and I've had to deal with public telling me that I had to be open, and I think we choose to do the investment, and I think if you want to be closed, you can.
Thank you, Counselor Dominguez. Counselor Jackie Vigil?
I agree with, Counselor Dominguez. I mean, there's parts of this that make sense, but like the sign part, but when we get into telling people what hours they can keep, I mean, they're paying the rent or they own the building or whatever the case may be, I think we're kind of, I mean, I just don't agree with that part of it.
Okay, I don't see any, yes, Mr. Sweezer?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify,
I've had my
Counselor-
light pressed,
I
but this
understood.
wasn't pressed in, I guess.
I wanted to clarify Counselor Hensley's comment on grandfathering. Unless there is specific language in the ordinance grandfathering the minimum number of hours, which I don't think there is, that part wouldn't be grandfathered in. The existence of real estate offices would, but the hours required to be open would not be a grandfathered issue.
Okay, is that clear before we go to Counselor Carson, to those who may have had that concern? Okay, Counselor Carson?
Okay, so you kind of clarified part of my question now. So this isn't gonna affect anybody currently that's offending that, I guess, that perception of not being open. This wouldn't affect anyone right now.
It would. That's what I was saying. There is no grandfathering for that kind of regulation.
Okay, and so what does this do for businesses like, does this do anything to help us move forward with businesses like the Grove? Like that's never open. That's never gonna be open. She doesn't have plans on opening it. The Oscars building, like, I don't see this really helping improve
So I
what's
think
happening downtown right now.
so when it's vacant, which is a different situation, you do have following this, an ordinance related to vacant buildings.
Okay, but to that point, they own, whoever has that building that has the business in owns it. You know, they do own it, and the person who's got it vacant and is basically being kind of the same sort of nuisance to downtown isn't getting dinged or really, I mean, we've created some regulation around that, but now we're forcing this person who actively has furniture and is trying to run a business out of there we're trying to dictate how long they can be open. So I think I think I'm gonna have to, if we do make a motion tonight, just so council's aware, I would make a motion to the effect of passing the entire ordinance, removing the hours, removing the enforcement of minimum hours. That's how I would pass it right now.
And so just to clarify a bit of the difference between what they're experiencing from a vacant building perspective versus a building that's being occupied and put in use, but then yet being closed type of situation. And so I think the vacant building issue that's going on is we do have some property owners for different reasons sitting on properties and not even leasing them out, not doing anything with them. And those are the true vacant properties. And then we've got properties that are being leased out. And what they're being leased out for, maybe that's not bringing the same foot traffic as what was intended with the zoning type of thing. So there is, I'm not saying that to talk you into anything, but I think there was a little bit of a variation between what's going on with property owners holding onto their properties and it's sitting vacant versus other property owners, they're leasing it, and then the business that's leasing the property is choosing not to have business hours type of situation.
And I understand that, but just to try to, I guess, iterate my point a little more is in the scenario where we're trying to dictate this business owner's hours of operation right now, there is a transactional operation going on. There's a lease, there's something happening, somebody's making money. And so it's hard for me to ding them when there's something happening there and these guys aren't getting dinged when there's whatever. I mean, just because you're a rich person, you have money to sit on properties doesn't give you the ability to slide and us ding these guys. So that's my issue with it. So, I'm just putting that out there. If I were to make a motion tonight, I would make a motion pretty much leaving it the same way it is, but removing the 60 hours. I don't think we should do that. I really don't. I think it's a huge overreach. Thank you, guys, and thank you for the hard work. I know everybody's worked on it, but I think it is a pretty hard overreach, especially when the vacant buildings are getting.
Okay, thank you, Council Carson. Councilor Hensley?
So I think what I'm gonna do, because I feel like obviously that one section is causing some heartburn and stuff. So I'm gonna move that we adopt ordinance number 21-2024, removing section 2 in regards to the central business district requiring the 60-hour threshold. And that way that allows then to be brought separately if needed or wanted.
It's actually section 1, I believe, Councilor Hensley, that does that.
Well, it says here 1, 2, 3, and number 2 is the central business district. So I'm just reading
Yeah,
from this.
Section 2 is.
I don't know what you're reading from, but the ordinance itself has that section as section
All right,
1.
whichever section it is.
The communication to us has number 2 in central business district requires central blah, blah, blah. Staff has added a threshold of 60 hours per month in order to provide a clear threshold while also providing reasonable flexibility. So.
Oh, that's
for
not an
clarification-
alternative, though. Just for structure of the Novus communication, that's not an alternative. That's just a paragraph number heading.
I know it's not an alternative, but that's what we're motioning.
Okay, so what you want to do is remove section 1 of the ordinance.
If that adheres to the motion that Councilor Hensley.
It does.
Proposed.
It does.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
I just have a quick, so just to clarify, it keeps the signage and it keeps the classification of real estate offices. All right, thank you.
And council, by removing that, does it affect anything else in this?
No, it does not. It's easily, section 1 of the ordinance is the only thing that deals with the 60-hour requirement, and that's all that it deals with.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. I don't see any lights on, so no further discussion. Please start voting.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 22-2024, an ordinance establishing a vacant building registration requirement in the central business district, setting forth maintenance requirements and penalties therewith.
So this ordinance does address what Councilor Carson was discussing. We do have a number of buildings in our downtown that are vacant and have been vacant for a long time. much like our other regulations, this is not intended to be excessively punitive. Again, we're trying to balance private property rights with our need to create a vibrant downtown. This is another regulation that did come at the recommendation of our Main Street Advisory Committee. And the wording is almost taken in its entirety exactly from the city of Pueblo. So basically, the gist of this ordinance change is that there would be an annual registration for vacant buildings, and then there would be a fee associated with the registration. So we have not set the fee. The fee would come before council at a different meeting, and it would be set by resolution. And the maintenance requirements, they're iterated in the ordinance, but really they're from the International Property Maintenance Code. There's really not anything in this ordinance that deviates from what we already have the authority to do. So we already have the authority, if a property is a nuisance property or there's illegal entrance or, rodents or, an accumulation of trash or debris or damage to the building, we already have the authority to work with that property owner to get the property cleaned up. So this one is just clear that if it's a vacant building, you need to keep it secured and closed, and you need to register it on an annual basis, and you will pay a fee. So we're, again, trying to move some of these property owners off of dead center and get them a little bit motivated to at least get, a lease going or something with their building. So another problem where there's bodies for buildings and not enough buildings.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for ordinance number 22-2024. If we have anyone in the audience who would like to come up to the podium to make any comments, please feel free to come up to the podium at this time. I don't see anyone in the audience coming to the podium, so I'll go to the Zoom participants to ask you to raise your hand by using the raise your hand feature so that we can recognize you and give you an opportunity to make your comments during this public hearing.
I don't see anyone choosing to raise their hand.
I don't see any hands raised either, so I'll go ahead and close this public hearing and turn it back over to council for comments or either a motion. Councilor Young-Villot.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 22-2024.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez,
I'm missing one.
she stepped out.
Oh, okay. The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. The second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 23-2024 and ordinance amending the mobile food vending regulations.
So this ordinance is admittedly more controversial. So this is one that we have had a fair amount of feedback from the public, and there are some strong opinions about. So there are opinions on both sides, but to take a very complicated ordinance like our mobile food ordinance and distill down the changes that we've made in a simple way. We are requesting, there's a buffer in place right now. That means that you can't have a food truck within 200 feet of a brick and mortar restaurant. And our proposal is to reduce that by half. And another one of the rules is that if you're within 200 feet or 100 feet, if that's changed, of a brick and mortar restaurant, you can still operate in that area, but you need approval from all of the business owners that you would affect. And so another change we're proposing is instead of all of the business owners have to agree, it would be a majority of the business owners would have to agree. So it wouldn't just be one business owner can veto having a truck nearby. Another one is, I think that most people think that food trucks are allowed on all vacant lots in town. They're not. On a paved parking lot, you are allowed, paved private parking lot, not a city parking lot, because we consider a parking lot to be like a principal use, like you're using your property as a parking lot. So this would allow you to be on a vacant lot, provided that you had gravel or some sort of a surface treatment so that there wasn't as much dust. So we didn't used to allow it on dirt lots. This is kind of a way to sort of open it up for dirt lots. And then it also allows you to sort of remove the distance requirement for special events. So special events that would go through a special approval process with staff in-house would be allowed and wouldn't have to obey either the 100 or 200-foot rule. And I'm pretty sure those are the high points of the things that are changing. Just to clarify a couple things, these are, you have to be on an area that's zoned commercial business, industrial, or central business. You can't operate in any of our residential districts. There are some specific locations that are set aside by council when this ordinance was adopted a few years ago that are kind of near residential areas, but they're really associated with parks. And we will discuss actual locations of food trucks in the next item on the agenda. There's also, you're not allowed under any circumstance to operate within the right of way of Main Street or Sixth Street. So that's off the table and no matter what. And then when you're measuring the distance from a food truck to a restaurant, you're measuring to the front door of the restaurant. That's how the measurements work. And so I think that clarifies some of the high points.
So the only other clarification I would add from just a historical, how did we get here perspective? I believe there were some individuals who had reached out to council members and that this item was actually brought to our attention from a council member perspective, which warranted then the work session. And these were some of the recommendations coming out of that work session from city council. I just want to make that clear because as you use your language of we're recommending, this actually was not something that was driven by staff.
Staff almost never wants to adopt new regulations. We like them the way they are. They're hard to remember, so learning new ones is terrible. I will also say that hours of operations set by the original ordinance, unless you're near a residential district, are from 6 a.m. to 2:30 a.m.
Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for ordinance number 23-2024. If we have anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments, feel free to come up to the podium at this time.
Good evening. My name is Kyle Woodward. I'm the owner of Woody's Q Shack. So just a little historical perspective, the original mobile vending ordinance that we're speaking of was written in part because of my business. In 2015, we decided to open our food truck full-time and we worked with city, we worked with business owners to develop what we feel is a fair ordinance as is written with a 200-foot buffer. Now that I'm in a brick and mortar, I understand a lot more of where the brick and mortar restaurants are coming from. And I'm speaking against every part of the new revisions of the ordinance. Primarily, I have several reasons, but my primary reason is the expense of running a brick and mortar restaurant compared to a food truck is not even comparable. Counselor Dominguez, I'm sure you understand this, as well as Counselor Hensley, you've been in the restaurant business before as well. Now, since COVID and the cost of doing business in a restaurant has skyrocketed due to the cost of inflation, our profit margins are very, very thin, extremely thin. They've always been thin in the restaurant business, but they're thinner now than they ever have been. And we're seeing brick and mortar restaurants close across the country at a rapid pace. So we're doing all that we can as brick and mortar restaurant owners to keep our businesses open. Having food trucks downtown would do nothing but hurt those margins. It would hurt them exponentially. And my restaurant itself, it employs around anywhere between 13 and 15 people at a time, depending on the year. I don't know what the new ordinance and having food trucks downtown would do to those jobs, but we would probably have to cut hours at times when we're bringing in more staff. For example, on First Fridays, different block parties, we try to make sure that we're staffed up. And if there are food trucks downtown for those block parties, we'd probably eliminate those extra positions that we're bringing in during those times. We moved into our current business as is on Main and San Juan, because we wanted to take advantage of the downtown business. We saw a business opportunity there and we jumped all over it. One of the reasons that we wanted to move down there is because of the downtown plans that are happening right now. We felt that it was very important to be down there. And one thing that I said, my dad used to be a previous owner with me, and we always said we won't get into a brick and mortar restaurant unless it's at the corner of Main and San Juan. So when Nestle Toll House went out of business, we jumped all over that. The ordinance as is has always been black and white. And a couple of examples that happened to us. When Spare Keg was going through they were getting ready to have their 1-year anniversary party. They asked us to bring our food trailer down there and be part of their 1-year anniversary celebration. And I went and talked to Scott as we were supposed to, and Scott didn't feel comfortable having us down there, so we didn't go down there, which is fair enough. Another example is during COVID, Darlene McCarroll at Century Property Management asked us to go down to her office and feed all the first responders and frontline workers of COVID. This was 2 weeks into COVID. So we had that all set in motion, and I was shot down by city manager due to the right of way on Main Street. We couldn't be down there, so we had to completely change plans. We weren't selling food or anything. We were just going to be down there handing free food out, and that plan got shot down too because of the mobile vending ordinance as written. As far as the 200-foot buffer goes, I feel it's more than fair. Monte Vista's ordinance is 500 feet. You can't have food trucks within 500 feet of a brick and mortar restaurant in Monte Vista. Salida's, I'm not sure what their buffer is, but you don't see any food trucks in downtown Salida that are parked right next to brick and mortar restaurants. Same with Pueblo. You know, pretty much anywhere that I've gone, I've never seen a food truck parked next to a brick and mortar restaurant. The other question that I have and that I want you guys to ask yourself and maybe look into is food trucks that are headquartered here in Alamosa. I'm sure that they're paying sales tax, but I highly question food trucks that are not based out of Alamosa. I highly question if they're paying sales tax. So that'd be something for you guys to look into. So the letter that I received from Rachel James regarding the new ordinance stated that a balance was desired between food trucks and brick and mortar restaurants. Going back to the original ordinance that was written in 2015, councilor members came to me and talked to me. Ty Coleman, you came and talked to me at my food truck. That's how we developed the new ordinance as is written. But with these new revisions, I have yet to hear or see anybody from the city asking for our opinion on the new ordinance. And I would like to know why. If the ordinance is revised, if you guys do choose to revise the ordinance, I would ask I ask for two things. One is keep direct competitive food trucks off of San Juan Avenue during block parties. Meaning I own a barbecue restaurant. I don't see any reason why there should be a barbecue food truck on San Juan Avenue. And I'm sure I can't speak for Scott and Angie, but I'm sure they feel the same way about their food. The other thing that I would ask is that if you do revise this ordinance, if you do choose to revise this ordinance, I ask that you keep the food trucks on the north end of San Juan. Don't have them parked directly next to my building. So in closing, I'm asking for your help in keeping my doors open by leaving the existing ordinance as is. The ordinance is a fair ordinance, and I'm speaking from experience in owning and operating a food truck. The ordinance as currently written is fair for everybody, and I ask that you please leave it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make comments? Please come up to the podium.
Thank you, council, for the opportunity to speak. Scott
There-
Graber, owner.
There is another microphone, so you don't have to bend over. If you just push so the light comes on. There you go.
All right, now we good? Cool. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Scott Graber, and along with my wife Angie, are owners of the San Juan building in downtown that currently houses the Rose Cafe, the DA's office, and the San Luis Valley Brewing Company. I'm not here to say anything negative about food trucks. In fact, I think the uniqueness, the hardworking people, the entrepreneurship is commendable. That said, I do have to defend my and my wife's investment in our choice to run a restaurant in a brick and mortar, and largely echoing Kyle's concern with the discrepancy of financial investment. We have to defend what we have purchased, remodeled, and the access that that provides to the customers. Otherwise, there would have been no point in that level of investment. We should be doing something else. So I want to defend it based on basically the discrepancy of financial investment. To do business downtown is something we want to do. We're excited about doing. We want to continue to invest, but it comes at a really hefty price tag. By the time you purchase a building, you remodel a building, you pay the fees and taxes and permitting. We're in for 25 grand a year just to be in existence, and that doesn't count the $1 million+ that's been invested in the property itself. So I think food trucks are a valuable part of the diversity of good towns, but so are brick and mortar establishments. And I think if you look at iconic downtowns, Denver, Durango, Telluride, those places have found a way, and I would challenge council and the folks doing downtown development to find a good fit for the diversity and the uniqueness and coolness that food trucks bring, but you must also defend the investment of people who have put huge amounts of time and money into their brick and mortars. I echo Kyle's sentiment. You aren't going to go downtown Denver and see in front of the Brown Palace or Elway's or Stranahan Steakhouse, you're not going to see food trucks within 200 feet of those establishments. You're not going to go to Durango and see food trucks in front of the Stratter Hotel or in front of Steamworks or Carver's, people that have put 30 to 50 to 100 years of investment into their properties. And I think that builds the success of those towns. Those anchor businesses draw others to invest there. They draw the uniqueness and the entrepreneurship of folks like food trucks who aren't quite to buying a building, but there needs to be a protection because of the level of investment for the brick and mortar businesses. Otherwise, for me, there is no incentive to do business in that way. And I hope council sees value for our town in doing business that way, in creating a beautiful brick and mortar space and running it that way. It does come down to what is your vision for your town? Do you want some long-term, highly invested anchor businesses that hopefully will stay and attract and draw, and we talk through and find a way for the new entrepreneurs to fit in? Or do you give the same right of access and the same financial privilege to those who are not as financially invested, in which case it undercuts the time and money spent to have that right of access that San Juan and Maine provides. So do I want food trucks to go away completely? No. Do I want to see one parked within vicinity of my front door? No, I don't. Block parties, a great chance for community building, a great chance for diversity. We've done literally hundreds of them in the 20 years, and I think we had, some part in the vision to make San Juan Avenue a festival street, and we love what it's become. Every time we do that, we have to pull a permit through you guys, the state. We have to weather rain, and if that happens, it's all a loss. And we have to spend a day or two of our time with our equipment and a staff up, like Kyle says, to put these on. We're out $1,000 invested before the thing even begins. So to allow someone who is invested much less, I don't know the permitting or the fee, to come down and roll in and take some of the sweat equity that's been put in and some of the cash flow. it's unabsorbable in the post-COVID environment for a brick and mortar like myself, and it does rub you wrong as well. So I want to see food trucks succeed, but not at the expense of the level of investment we've brought to it. And I hope as you go forward, you'll work with them and brick and mortars to find a place in the town. There's ways to do it. If you guys go to the cities, I mean, Durango's got a really cool area that they've designated, and it's a draw because there's 6 or 8 food truck vendors and it becomes its own draw, but they've also chosen to protect their anchor businesses from direct competition in that way. So I have no particular problem with food trucks operating on vacant spaces. I do echo Kyle. I would love to see 200 feet, if not more. I would love to see a 100% consensus of brick and mortar owners if there's going to be a variance because of the level of investment of all those folks. And for block parties or for festivals, I think the puller of the permit, the person who puts in the modification of premise or the special event permit, has the right to both the failure if it rains and the right to the rewards for their work and their efforts and their investment. So I don't believe that food trucks should just be able to roll in to those events without the 200 feet or the consensus of the brick and mortar business owners' approval to do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make any comments?
Mayor, council, staff. Eddie Valdez, Knee Knockers Bar and Grill here in Alamosa. I too just echo the sentiments of Kyle and Scott, and I don't really have a whole ton to add to that. I mean, everything they said was on point. The thing that was really glaring to me when I read the letter was irregardless of ordinances, they will be allowed in special events. Those things are planned. There's large investments made to create those special events. And as a brick and mortar, we go through a lot of pains to make those things happen. And what constitutes a special event? For my business, we're at the golf course. We have tournaments consistently through the summer. We don't have a lot of foot traffic in the winter. Our winter hours are a major, major struggle for us. We too invest heavily in our success and our survival. And I don't know, is a golf tournament a special event? In my eyes, sounds like one. I mean, and for somebody to come in and be able to take a piece of that opportunity that we are that is so vital to our success, it's pretty scary. I really won't elaborate too much because I feel like everything that's been said has been spot on, but I do struggle with this myself, and I think it's a very, very scary thing for existing businesses that have put in years of time and effort, and new establishments like Knee Knockers Bar and Grill who are taking those, looking at those paths that our predecessors around town have shown us and saying, hey, you know, we'd like to be a part of this community. We'd like to do some of the same things that are going on around town. And we're trying to get there one step at a time. We don't have the years, but we will not be able to create those years in an environment like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make any comments at this time before we go to the Zoom participants? If so, make your way to the podium. If not, we're gonna go to the Zoom participants. Okay, I don't see anyone coming, so we'll go ahead and go to Zoom. And Ms. Martinez, if you could give them instructions again on how to raise their hand so we can recognize them.
Yes, sir. If you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak right now, you'll use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. Okay, Mayor, I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back first to staff to just clarify some of the things that came up in comments before we turn it over to council. Okay? And I'll come to you in a minute.
I have clarifying question for staff during this.
Go
I'm
ahead,
very
go ahead.
confused because we had three people come up and make comments to the effect that we're changing this ordinance to allow mobile vending on Main Street. That's not happening. And so I'm very confused as to how that got communicated out there, because this state's pretty clear that that's not allowed. And I think from a safety standpoint, it would be kind of dumb to have a mobile truck parked there and people. I'm very confused as to where that came from, because the ordinance clearly states that you can't sell on Main Street.
It's the reduction from 200 feet to 100 feet that I think is mostly the concern.
But just reading through this, it's so strict. I think this tightened up a lot of the other stuff that was in there. So I don't know how this, like, I really don't even be able to see you being able to operate a food truck on Main Street with these regulations right here. So I'm a little confused as to how that's being communicated, because just reading through this, skimming it, it's very confusing. So I'd like that clarified. Can they operate on Main Street or not?
So when I was listening to the public input, they have businesses on Main Street, and so they've talked about why they wanted their business on Main Street. But I didn't get a sense that there was confusion of allowing food trucks on Main Street. And you are correct, Counselor Carson, this does not allow food trucks on the actual Main Street. I think when I listened to the comments, it was, the location they picked, how it's on Main Street. They're also on San Juan, which has a lot of the special events and those types of things. And so what I picked up on was reduction of 200 feet down to 100 feet, meaning it can get closer, not on Main Street, but just closer to their business. And that idea of the special events and those types of things. And now, obviously, Kyle was very clear, he's against all of the changes that were recommended, but those were the two big ones that seem to jump out as it relates to their business operations and location.
I would like to also clarify about special events. Special events are activities that take place in city parks and on city parking lots and in public right of ways. Those are the instances, I think, where generally we issue the special use permits through the city. The special event permits. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, Counselor Hensley?
I would like first if there was any more clarifications, because I'm gonna kind of respond to some of this, but if there was anything more before, because I know you started there.
So one of the clarifications I think would be good, and I'm not as much in the weeds on this, is this idea of it just allows any of it in special events. There still would be either the 200 or 100 foot rule, correct? No.
No, the buffer wouldn't apply to special events specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have the language in the ordinance if the council would like it.
Okay, I just wanted to, so if we were doing a special event block party on San Juan, that 200 or 100 foot would not apply.
So the exact language says, however, the distance restriction to brick and mortar dining establishments shall not apply.
So I just wanted to, for my own self, and then as it relates to Mr. Valdez's concerns, my impression is the property owner and who's pulling the special event would control what food trucks are going in.
Yes.
Okay.
I did talk to Mr. Valdez and explained that he would be part of that conversation as the proprietor of Knockers.
But it's still pretty wide open as it's written in the ordinance. Okay.
Okay, Counselor Hensley, then Counselor Carson.
Okay, so, I think, so I guess I'm gonna kind of cover a lot of this. So one of the things when this was brought forward, there were definitely people who, when we had our work session, sort of communicated in regards to some of the positives of having the food trucks. I remember opening Chili's, and I remember there was an uproar with the restaurants when Chili's opened, and the idea of, oh my gosh, Chili's is coming to town, it's gonna knock us all out of business. And really it's that idea of that if you have something that gives you competitive advantage, obviously you're gonna stay successful. And obviously many restaurants did fine, and look at Chili's is doing great, and so are many restaurants. At the same time though, I have received one and a half. I say 1.5 because the other one was not 100% supportive, but not against, in regards to supporting this new proposal. But I have received over 10 with concerns about it. One of the things, so I'm going to tell you sort of where I was going back and forth. So then to argue that this is a good thing is because I definitely go and get things from food trucks, but I also go into restaurants because a lot of times I want to sit and have something to eat. And when you do food trucks, it's not really that kind of environment. And I think there's pluses to both. I will say that, Scott, one of the things that you brought up, I wrote all my little notes here, but one of the things that you brought up, which kind of was where my thoughts have been going for the last week, so it kind of supported where I was thinking, is the idea that, because obviously without a doubt, I think it would really behoove our community to have food trucks. I think there's something that when you go to communities and they have them, it's really great. I was starting to really feel like as we continue to develop Hunt Street and what's happening in Hunt, I was thinking to myself, that would be a great place because it's still far enough. It still kind of lends itself because I kind of envision as Hunt continues to grow, our First Fridays will spread out. All of our events, people will walk around more. It's going to expand a couple of blocks. So for me, I was already envisioning that maybe that food truckish kind of vibe and feel could be as we develop Hunt Avenue and what's going on there. I will say, I do think there's something to be said to allowing more food vendors or food trucks in some of the spaces, such as having the asphalt, where it's not, or where you can have some, it doesn't have to be the asphalt, but that we could have it in some private places if it is, doesn't cause too much dust or however you said it. And then also the idea of potentially, and I think this is the next one, is that there might be some of the city properties or things like that where we could have food trucks. I think that's coming up next. So I'm going to be honest, I'm probably heading more towards the idea that if we pass this, it obviously is going, in my mind, needs to take some of the stuff away that does not necessarily always support what we're also doing downtown with the idea of trying to have our doors open and things happening. So I definitely am looking forward to hearing everybody else. And I know I've spoken for a while, but I kind of needed to walk through my thought process on this.
Thank you, Counselor Hensley, Counselor Carson, and then Counselor Dominguez.
So I just want clarification on this, like 100%. Are we ever going to allow a truck? I mean, San Juan's different. I'm not talking about San Juan. I'm talking about the highway that we go through all this hubbub for anything we want to do on that highway. Are we ever going to allow a food truck to park on that road and sell food?
We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to authorize them in
I
the
wanted
CDOT right away.
clarification on that because I think just from a personal standpoint, that's very dangerous and we get enough complaints. And don't need nobody getting run over. So I just think that'd be silly. But that's my main question for clarification. I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
I might also clarify that you can't just park on any city street also. So just because of the way the buffers are written, that means if you went to, say, like a private property owner that has a parking lot and it was privately owned and it was within 100 foot of a brick and mortar, that's what we're talking about. Right now, the way the rules are written, you can't just go sit up on on city streets. There are specific, it's the next item we'll discuss by resolution, but there are specific areas adjacent to city parks and on city streets where you're allowed to go. It's not any city street.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Dominguez, and then Counselor Yanvijo.
All right, so I've owned a restaurant in Alamosa, not on Main Street. And when IHOP came, it came. It came. People can open businesses. People could do business how they want, wherever they want. Every time I hear the word Main Street, it just, to me, it's like, it's okay if we populate it with everybody in town, but it's not okay when other people want to go to Main Street. And for me, that is just, it irks me. I've owned a business, not to frown on any of my restaurateurs here. I was in the restaurant business for 29 years, 29. I was on Main Street. I was in the South Side. I was in a mobile food unit. And you cannot compare a $5,000 investment to a $5 million investment. It doesn't matter.
I borrowed $5,000 to start my restaurant. It's no different than somebody who has 500,000. I just want to clarify that whenever you start a business or you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something, you can't compare like that. It took everything in me to do that business. And second of all, if it's a city event, where I stand on this is all vendors should be allowed. I know I put on events. I allow vendors that I want at my event because I pulled the permit. But if it's city oriented and it's downtown and it's First Fridays and it's everything that consists of Alamosa, it's not just Main Street. We're Alamosa. I'm up here representing my ward. I don't represent Main Street. I don't represent the industrial park all separately. I represent Alamosa as a whole. And if you only have $2,000 to start a hot dog cart and you're not good enough to be somewhere where you're good enough to stand and spend money, that doesn't sit right with me. I think it's fair enough. And if people are afraid of competition, then I wasn't. I knew our help was coming. They didn't have chili, but they still hurt me. But we didn't have no conversations about that. We didn't have no conversations about that. You can come in and bring any business you want into this town, whether you're downtown or I'm in the south side and we don't like it, you can. It's not against the law. It is not gonna be a huge disaster to allow an ice cream vendor to be on San Juan. That's not an issue. To give the power and authority of everybody downtown on Main Street to come to a consensus to eliminate people, that's not good. The majority should be held there, not everybody. If you want Alamosa as a community to come downtown, we better start fitting in all together, not just on your terms and not just how you see things. My business was in the south side for 15 years. I closed it because the restaurant business is hard. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Actually, I would get out while you can. And it shouldn't be on the backs of us. It shouldn't be our fault. It shouldn't be the guy in the taco truck. It shouldn't be the guy in the hot dog mobile just because that's all he has and can afford to do. It shouldn't be his fault that you go out of business. There are plenty of factors to going out of business. Restaurant business is hard. So anybody who wants to do it, whether you're in a brick and mortar or a food truck, should be able to do it. Now, when you pull event permits, you control that. You know that. You know that. But when somebody, if the city is involved, if we're involved in any place in downtown, whether it's burning pallets, whatever it is we do there, and somebody wants to come in and sell something, I agree with Kyle. You shouldn't let a barbecue food truck go and park even 1,000 feet from his place. When I do vending and I have a show, I don't tell 2 people come sell tacos. No, 1 person is already. Figure something else out. And third, we still choose what we want to eat. I feel like I'm getting a sense of being herded like a cow because that's all that's there and is available. No, there's nothing wrong. When I'm downtown, I choose what I want to eat, whether it's Kyle's, whether it's pizza, whether I choose, not you. Like, just because you're there doesn't mean I have to eat that. But if the city is involved in any special events downtown, I feel anybody who pulls a license from this city should be able to be allowed to be at that event with the restriction, wherever it is, however that looks, we'd have to hash that out. But as far as comparing investments and the location of it, it just sits wrong with me. We can't be good enough to come down there and spend money, but not be good enough to go down there and make money on one day, an event, maybe. First Fridays is once a month. I mean, I've been in both. I still have my food truck unit. It's not gonna put you out of business. If you go out of business, it's gonna be other things. It's gonna be other things. If this thing is there out every day, okay, I understand, but I don't think that's what we're asking here, right? We can't have a mobile unit on Main. If there's an event that requires the whole community come, that the city is invested in, it should look different. But if Scott pulls a permit, he decides who's there. He does. His restaurant just happens to be next door to where he has his events. When I pull my event licenses, if I'm in a park or something, I choose who's in that park. There's still people who park outside, but I'm like, you know what? If they don't want my food, they don't want it. This sits different with me. And I prove, if we do make a motion, I say we make it with changes and discuss what that looks like.
So are you saying you want mobile vending trucks on Main Street?
No, I didn't say that once.
Yeah,
I
so-
didn't say that
So hold up,
once.
hold up, hold up.
I
hold up,
think
hold
we
up.
already
Let
talked
him
that they're
finish.
not allowed.
So,
Anyway, that's where I stand with that. Main Street is awesome, but you know what? I feel like I'm not invited there because of all the things that have been coming up. Everything on our agendas, month after month after month, is brought forward by the Main Street. This is Alamosa too, not just Main Street. This is Alamosa. And I'm here to represent Alamosa.
thank you, Counselor Dominguez.
Mayor,
Yes.
I feel like we do need to make a correction, and I apologize for this. This is what happens when we try to do ordinance stuff on the fly. But I do think the city attorney's interpretation of how the ordinance is written is different than the discussion that we had as it relates to the special events. So the 100 or 200 feet, whatever is landed on, would still apply, type of thing if San Juan is closed. So it may be a moot point, but I just want to make sure that we clarify that direction.
But they have the autonomy to vote, right? Like, if an ice cream truck wanted to go to San Juan event,
The part that would make the change is that if, say, there's 4 businesses within 200 feet, if 3 of them give permission, what would change is just one of them saying no wouldn't prevent it from happening. So that's the recommended change to address that situation.
yeah, so then I would say, as long as it ain't same foods, like the competition, so yeah.
Okay.
So that's on them as business owners. I'm speaking to them, whoever's downtown, that's what is uncomfortable to me is not allowing nobody at all.
So my clarification wasn't related to anything you said. It was to clarify the previous interpretation we had given.
Okay.
See Rachel frowning, so I'm willing to entertain that, but I pulled up the ordinance to just double check this. And the distance requirements do not apply. In fact, the whole ordinance doesn't apply to special events in city parks, which we have to authorize anyway. But for special events in city rights of way, like streets and parking lots, the 100, 200, whatever it is, limitation would still apply, also with the ability to get the permission of those businesses located within that distance limitation. And I don't know if you have it up there, Rachel. I'm looking at subsection G, procedures for approved special events. No.
That's where I read it.
I don't have a subsection 3.
And Rachel, can you talk into the mic, please?
It's not even on. This is from,
I'm on the second reading one. There is a first reading one. I could pull that one up.
this is the one that was attached to the council communication.
There are 2 attached to the council communication.
Okay.
So let me pull up the first reading one. It doesn't have a G3 either.
D3.
I'm sorry?
D3?
D3?
Yeah, D.
Oh, G sub 2 sub D. G sub 2 sub D sub 3. Okay, here we go.
So is there some cleanup that needs to be done on these ordinances?
Well, let us finish, letting the rest of the council speak, and then we'll bring that back to you. You'll be after Counselor Krebs, and you can bring that up, okay? And then we'll see about the cleanup, because we'll see.
Okay, yep, you're right. That's exactly right.
Okay, Rachel is correct. I'm sorry, Mayor.
And what, What is
So-
that?
Yeah, so Counselor, Young V Hill was next, but before we go to him,
Yeah, so.
let's make it real clear, because I think it's confusing right now. So if you could be very clear with what it entails right now, would be very helpful.
It's a complicated ordinance, and I had forgotten the provision that Rachel was talking about when I said that a special event approval still had those distance limitations. There is a subsection that says specifically, distance restrictions to brick and mortar dining establishments shall not apply if approved in a public space pursuant to a special event. So this little subsection does get rid of those distance limitations for special event mobile food vendors.
Okay, Counselor Young V Hill, are you good? You want to go
I
ahead?
have
Go
a
ahead,
bunch,
go
I
ahead,
have a
go
bunch,
ahead,
Mayor,
go
a
ahead,
bunch.
go ahead.
Okay,
Thank you for the clarification.
yeah, thank you. First question, is a golf course considered a public park? Is our golf course a public?
It's not designated as a park. It is public property. It is not in the item that's coming next where we're identifying areas of our city-owned property where we should expand it. It's not identified in that.
So that's more for the next agenda item. Okay, can we, because I feel like there's a lot of, could we go like issue by issue, the feet requirement, the special event deal, a public city event, vacant lots? Could we go like each thing and see where we're all at and come to consensus? If that's where we want to go, council?
In a public meeting?
So-
Isn't that more of a work session?
I agree.
So what we're gonna do, let's let everybody ask all their questions, and then we'll start talking about what's. some of the
Okay,
next
so
steps.
I'll just, because there's a lot here, Mayor. And I'm not a business owner. I'm a public school teacher, so I agree that there should be the vacant lot areas for the mobile food trucks. On the special events, I think I need more clarification that like, so if it's a city ran event, like a First Fridays, I think anybody should be able to go down there with their food truck, but not be same competitive. So no barbecue next to Kyle's, no burger place next to Scott's. If it's an event that the restaurant owner is pulling the permit, they have full control of what should be there, and if they don't want any food trucks there, that's their right. And could a food truck still be 200 feet away from that perimeter? I guess is a question.
Not during a special event.
Not during the special event. Okay, thank you.
And that is why I clarified that special events, it's a permitting process through the city and it's for public rights of way. So if it's closing a street, like to do an event on San Juan, it's using a city-owned parking lot or it's using a city-owned park.
And I want to be clear too, the events you're seeing on San Juan, I cannot think of one that is a city event. So First Fridays is not coordinated by the city. We don't pull any permits. I'm looking at Andy. And I'm not seeing him. Okay, I don't know of a city event that we have done on San Juan. First Friday is not a city event.
Winterfest or the Ice Festival.
Okay, Ice Fest is one
How
Ice
about,
Fest.
the art walk?
Okay, you got two.
Well, I'm just,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
trying to one up.
No,
you.
no,
I'm
no,
just
no.
thinking.
Yeah, no, so I'm just saying, but from what you guys are envisioning, it's very, very minor. A lot of what you're seeing on San Juan is not city events.
Okay, so then I'm thinking like on a random Thursday night in the middle of the summer when it's really nice weather and there's no events going on, can a food truck park their rig 200 feet north of Kyle's place right now?
Not
No.
on the street.
Not on the street.
And this wouldn't change it. So it's not opening up city streets.
Okay,
It's removing the distance requirement to like a privately owned piece of property.
yep. And so I think my thing is open up the vacant lots and the dirt and that. And then I do like your idea, Liz, of having a special place in town that we could also activate that's away from restaurants for food trucks as well. I hope I made sense.
And Counselor Vihel, if I could make sure that everyone understands, so when we talk about, and I know you understand this, but I don't want any fear. When you talk about opening up the vacant lots, that still interacts with the 200 or 100 foot. So for someone owning a brick and mortar building, we're not saying suddenly that's waived, that 200 and 100 is waived. We're just saying if there's a vacant lot, because before there could not be a food truck. So that 200, 100, whatever that ends up being, that still does apply. So I just want to make sure people don't start getting worried if we're opening up all the vacant lots.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Counselor Yon V. Hill. Next is Counselor Krebs, and then I believe Counselor Carson, then Counselor Hensley. Did you have anything you want to say? I don't want to over. Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure because you haven't had a chance to speak. Okay, go ahead, Counselor Krebs.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
So, full transparency, I'm the council person that brought it to council to discuss further. I wanted to be completely honest about that. There's a couple reasons I did. One was some time ago, there was a public event on San Juan, which I went down, totally enjoyed, got hungry, was told that the barbecue place was open, but they had run out of food. And so they had closed their doors. So I went, of course, across the street, and it was a 45-minute to an hour wait. So, you know, and it was later at night, I fully admit, but in the back of my mind, I was like, it'd be nice to have had a food truck to take advantage of, even if I had to walk a block or two to get to it. Then that moment passed and went on. More recently, there was an event. So again, full transparency. 4th of July, ice cream was denied to be at night at a special event because there was a veto rule basically in effect where if one said no, the answer was no. And I could not logically reconcile that of why ice cream was such a threat to dinner restaurants, that I thought that was important enough to bring before council and actually have the discussion of whether an ordinance that is now going into its 9th year that came about before food trucks actually became a thing here, if it needed to be looked at again, which is honestly why we're sitting here tonight. I appreciate the work that the city has done, and I appreciate the work sessions that we've all gone through. But from what I'm hearing from the ordinance, some of the things that bothered me at the very beginning still stand. I don't think it should be an all or nothing for food trucks. I think if there's a special event and a particular food truck comes in, the restaurants there are still going to be asked. But I don't feel that if one no means an absolute no. I think it should be a majority. I think that is fair and equitable to the food truck as well as to the restaurants, depending on the food. Now, having said that, I am hearing no buffer for the special events. That does bug me a little bit. I don't think that is fair to the restaurants. Should it be 100 feet or 200 feet? Should it stay the way it is? I don't know, but I don't think that that is fair. And to Councilor Dominguez's point, the same food being offered barbecue in front of a barbecue place. I don't, absolutely not, but I wouldn't be the one pulling the permit, so I wouldn't be the one deciding who would be there as a food truck. But I think you also can't pick and choose like that, so it still has to be equitable for everyone. So I think consideration of a buffer for special events should be at least discussed on that. The 200 to 100 feet, I understand, and I think that there's wiggle room there for discussion. I think just because our streets are so short in town, that the 200 seems excessive in this case. But other than that, direct competition, I understand, but I also understand that this is a small enough town. I think everybody in this room has eaten at every restaurant in town. And I don't think there is a competition. When I want barbecue, I know where I'm going to go. When I want one of your salads, I know where I'm going to go. And food trucks can't compete with that, you know. But if I want a funnel cake or ice cream, I know where I'm going to go. And you can't compete with that, you know. So I think leaving the choice up to the consumer is sometimes in the best interest, depending on the food truck. I think some more discussion about the buffer zone for special events, because again, I don't want to see a food truck right up against the brick and mortars just because they can. I don't think that's fair. And let me see. And that was pretty much it. My biggest thing was if one person says no, then no one can have it. I don't think that's right at all. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor Krebs. Okay, we'll go back to the order that I saw the lights on first. I believe it was Counselor Carson and Counselor Hensley.
I felt pretty dumb earlier because everybody laughed while I asked about Main Street 3 times. It was very confusing, and to me, this doesn't even really affect Main Street. So that's one of the reasons I was asking repeatedly. A city block is 500 feet long. So I think 200 feet is actually fairly reasonable. You don't want a restaurant right next to you, because that's about what I'm looking at on Google Maps. One of our city blocks is about 500 feet long. So if you could set a food truck, I guess, because even looking at this, it's very difficult to understand where they would even post up in proximity to one of your businesses to affect it as far as Main Street. So that's what I'm trying to understand here. So I was kind of annoyed that this whole ordinance isn't really even changing much. The access to other parking lots, I think should be a deal. So I think that should stick in there. But the 200 to 100, I'm okay with keeping that at 200 or even increasing it, because again, a city block's only 500 feet long. So that isn't that long. I mean, but that was my issue. It was very confusing. And to me, I was just so curious why that kept coming up. Seemed like that's what we were pushing for. So yeah, but I think the 200 feet has to be a minimum at this point.
Thank you, Counselor Carson. Counselor Hensley?
Okay, here we go. I'm going to make a motion, and this motion is going to have some adjustments. So if somebody wants to write notes, and we'll see if this is a go or not. All right, so I'm going to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2324. I'm looking at the main document that was sent to us. I'm making this motion, keeping the 200 feet, requiring majority versus unanimous on the approval, allowing mobile food vending on the vacant lots with some kind of surface, allowing licensed vendors to operate in city right-of-ways during pre-approved events with the 200 and the unanimous decision, and with the idea that it is non-competitive.
Hold on 1 second, Counselor Hensley, because I'm not for sure if you really meant unanimous on that last one or you wanted majority.
Majority.
Okay.
You're
'cause I
right.
just
Thank
wanna
you,
make sure
majority.
we're
Keeping with the
clear.
majority.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize. Try to keep it all in order here. Keeping with the majority, but with the idea of non-competitive. And then obviously whatever the little updates for inconsistencies. Did we follow that? Okay,
So-
that's my motion.
I've got it down.
Okay, so I see our city attorney is about to chime in, so.
I'm just trying to, so there's an easy way to do most of what you said.
You did it easily. I went step
Well,
by
I'm just
step.
talking about I agree, but just to make the record clear, we can deal with the ordinances in front of us. The only changes you have proposed to it is eliminating where it drops down to 100 feet. That still stays 200. And then we could get rid of the subsection that Rachel and I were just talking about, where it says, however, the distance restrictions to brick and mortar dining establishments shall not apply. Just delete that. And then I think that accomplishes everything that you've
And
done.
see, I really think mine made it easier. It was clear, but okay. And then making it for non-competitive.
Which is why I wanted to ask you, do you, if we just delete the sentence that says, however, the distance restriction to brick and mortar dining establishments shall not apply, then that distance restriction applies. If that distance restriction is in, do you care whether it's competitive or not?
Yes.
Okay, and if you do, what it says now is conflicts with existing businesses and concessionaires, permitted events or other special activities. So in other words, and I think maybe we make it clearer in saying conflicts with existing businesses, add parentheses, offering the same fare, close parentheses, that would take care of it. Just in terms of wordsmithing on the fly here, I think that does it, rather than bringing another draft back to you.
Yeah, I guess what I was taking is we can make these changes, not have to bring a draft back to make it match what this motion
That's
is.
what I was figuring. I felt like I was making a motion if everybody agreed or we got the consensus, as I was making a motion so we wouldn't have to come back with it right now. So I was adjusting it accordingly from what I heard from out here as well as from what we were discussing.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Along with majority, right? With the
Majority.
majority piece, right?
So I did say that one word wrong, so I do want it to be majority, not unanimous on both sections.
I'll second. If
Okay.
everybody, if we're ready.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Now for any additional comments or discussion, Counselor Jan Vigil.
Sorry, just real quick, who's gonna enforce the majority piece? Who's gonna, or is there like a map, like you gotta talk to this restaurant and that, like, who's gonna do that? Or what does that look like?
That's when you apply for your mobile food vending license and you have to draw a map that shows your location.
Okay, and then would this be the certain place to maybe add what you said, Liz, in your first comments about 30 minutes ago about like a designated area for mobile food trucks? Or is that in the next agenda item?
So it's two different things. So the next item is gonna take a look at some of the city property
Okay.
to expand that. The idea of encouraging maybe on a private lot to have kind of like what Durango has, that's kind of a different discussion. I don't know if that's what you were talking about in the beginning.
Well, and so it was, I mean, eventually, so I was talking also my vision, so where I see things for the future, like more the hunt area. But I do think that for these events, because we'll have the 200-foot, that way it's not, it's definitely further away. It's not on, it's not blocking anybody's business. And at the same time, it's bringing in different things that are non-competitive.
So I would just like in the future, maybe a couple months from now or whatever, talk about that, making a designated area for food trucks.
And my thought there is when we get to that point, who knows this, we could come back with this
Yep.
again.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any further discussion? No further discussion. Please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. Resolution number 11, 2024, resolution establishing certain additional food zones for mobile food vending.
Ms. Martinez, can you please bring up Exhibit B? So the mobile food locations, the actual places where you can set up that are eligible, because you can't just operate on any city street, there's specific locations in town that are allowed. And we're proposing to increase that by 5. So they're the blue spots, the yellow spots around them are just to make them look jazzy. That is, if you stay on that, oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so the buffers are shown. The blue buffer is the 100 feet, which council has not approved, and the green is the 200 feet from existing brick and mortars. And so this location is adjacent to the Visit Alamosa's new RV parking lot, and it's within a city lot. And that's the first location we're proposing. If you go to the second page,
Sorry, I'm a little so, tell me where that, what that spot is again?
okay, so the new parking lot where the murals are that CVB just did with the RVs, it's just north of there.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry.
Kind of near the new rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Yep. Next page, please. Okay, so this is one by City Hall by our well house, kind of near Cole Park off of Hunt Avenue. And then there's a location actually on Hunt Avenue on this same page. Those are the next 2. So the 4th location, if you go down a little bit, those are the 2 from the previous one. The 4th location is in the city-owned parking lot next to the Mountain Valley Church, which used to be the First Baptist. That is one that we have a lot of enforcement issues with because people often park there and you're not allowed to have a food truck there. Okay, and then the final one is, if you go down further, that's the same one that's by the Old Baptist Church or the Mountain Valley Church. It's just a different, it's showing you the buffers to the restaurants. But if you go down, the 5th and final option is in the new Friday Health Plans or former Friday Health Plans owned parking lot. Which obviously, if you were to locate there, you'd have to get permission from whoever ends up owning that lot. But it would be eligible.
So I think on this, council can see that it's all outside of the 200 feet buffer areas. And it was an attempt to try to add more areas for, mobile food vending.
Okay,
If you go down, the rest of this document is the food ones that are already established, if they'd like to look at them. I don't know if council wishes to go through these, but that's an area on 11th Street next to Boyd.
So it changes a little. So now it's red instead of blue. So the area for mobile vending on the ones that are existing is red.
These are very old maps. If you go down, this is by Carroll Park. The next one is near the north end of Cole Park, near the senior center. You can go down one more. This one is near the disc golf course. This one is near Friends Park and the Boys and Girls Club. This one is near Jardín Hermosa Park. I probably butchered that. This one is near Olympian Park and the bowling alley. This one is near the Family Rec Center. We have one by Sunset Park. And last but not least, one by Zapata. Historic Park.
okay. Any other comments before I turn it to council? Do you have any other comments, Ms. James, before I turn it back over to council?
No further comments.
Okay, Councilor Yanavihil?
Mayor, I'm ready to make a motion
Okay.
that we move to approve resolution number 11-2024.
Councilor Krebs?
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I have questions. Just to clarify, for food trucks with these locations, they have to pull a permit. They just can't park there. How long can they be there? How long would the permit be allowed for?
Turn your microphone on.
Sorry. You have to leave every night. You can't just stay there
Okay, but it's from the 6 AM to 2:30 in the morning?
unless you're near a residential area in any of the ones that were already established.
And the ones that are already established are all residential areas?
So it's to 9 o'clock at night, I think.
Okay. And that same permitting process also applies to what we were discussing in the earlier.
I believe the only change that's made is you have to show your permit in your front window.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, I second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Crab. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. James. You've been extremely busy tonight. All right, that brings us to the finance. First reading of ordinance number 24-2024. An ordinance making the annual appropriation for fiscal year 2025.
Okay, thank you, council. And as the city clerk brings up the presentation, I'm planning to somewhat quickly go through the presentation we did for the public budget meeting. Because I feel this gives a pretty decent overview of what the 2025 budget looks like. I am not going to spend very much time on our vision and mission. I think council crafted those and is well aware of what our vision and mission are. On our city's organizational chart, the only item I added for the public meeting, because to put numbers to it, it is pretty surprising that we are at 249 city employees. And so we are a major employer in our community. The focus areas, if we look at kind of where the funding is, the areas that we're having to dedicate a lot of brain power to try to work on and fix and different things like that. Housing, our team working with housing partners has been successful in bringing just under $10 million in grants for our housing priorities. Public safety remains a focus area, infrastructure, economic development, and outdoor recreation. The next slide is just a budget overview. As you might remember, we've got different funds, and my advice to the public on that is to think of them as buckets. Water goes in and only can be spent and come out for very specific things except for the general fund. So for example, for the street trust fund, there's a dedicated sales tax that goes in, and it can only be spent on those streets that were identified in the resolution and presented to the voters. From a revenue perspective in 2025, we are planning to bring in almost $47 million. You can see the general fund is about 55% of that. Enterprise is 21%. Community recreation is almost 8%. Then it gets into the smaller funds. The expenditures we are anticipating are 53 million, and that is more than the revenues, obviously, and all of that is in our enterprise fund with some of the capital projects that we knew were coming and we were saving up for. For the general fund, you can see that drops down to being just 47% of the expenditures. Enterprise fund is 26%. Whereas before they were 21% for revenue, and you can see the breakdown for the other funds. For the general fund, we'll skip kind of what comes out of the general fund because I know it's been a long night. Oh, sorry, I said that and then I started talking. We are projecting just a 2.5% increase in our sales tax. It's been extremely flat. And we project for it to probably remain flat into the early parts of 2025. Also, we get asked a lot of times how much does our budget rely on property taxes? So you can see there it's about $650,000 for property taxes. So if you look at the next one, thank you, Holly. The general fund revenue is almost 26 million. 43% of that comes from taxes. And then you can see 42% is coming in from grants with that blue part. That next larger part, the orange, yellow looks like up there, the transfers, that's when we transfer money back in from our capital. When we transfer money in to pay for some of the software equipment and the cost allocations. General fund expenditures. This graph is a little off because our little development services budget shows at 40%, and that's not normally what it is. Of that $10 million budget, 7.4 million is for housing. We're passing through grants. 1 million is for the early childhood facility. 510,000 is for the levy, and another 1 million is for Hunt Avenue. So they're not normally that big of a piece of the puzzle. In all honesty, the biggest chunks are usually public safety and our streets. For example, our public safety department, we are just shy of $6 million because they have several little slices in there. And our street maintenance is at $2 million. Normally, our development services, I don't think they'd even be at $1 million. So it's a little bit skewed because a lot of those special projects that are flowing through. The next fund is the enterprise fund, which is our utilities. And then if we go ahead and go to the graph, we're anticipating about almost 10 million in revenue. About 59% of that is the charges for services. And per the ordinance that council adopted last year, we are including a 5% increase for sanitation, water, and sewer. We are planning on doing a rate study in 2026. That next biggest chunk is transfers of almost 29%. And that's when we are transferring in about 2.7 million from that utility sales tax, where 702 of that is going to go to the levy. And then the orange, yellow up there is the grants, what called intergovernmental revenue. That is the grants coming in. From an expenditure perspective, we are planning on spending over $14 million. You can see capital expenditures is about 51% of that. And then we've got operations, transfers, personnel, those costs. So we are spending about 4 million more than what we are bringing in because of some of those big projects. The street trust fund is next. And if we go to the pie chart, it's a pretty simple pie chart. We've got the one dedicated sales tax, and we've got the continued commitment of transferring 500,000 from the general fund. So that is the revenue for the street trust fund. The next slide shows the expenditures. A majority of that is the both phases of 2nd Street, and then the design of West 7th Street, as well as the unassigned maintenance and the concrete replacement. Going next to the Community Recreation Fund, we are anticipating about 3.7 million in revenue. You can see 55% of that comes in from taxes. Golf is about 20%. Grants is about 17%. And then you can see some of the smaller slices there. From an expenditure perspective, we are budgeted to spend 3.5 million. And you can see the breakdown of the pie chart there. Under the capital improvements, there's a lot of colors here, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But I think the really important part from a public perspective is in 2025, we are planning almost $15 million in capital projects. So that includes facilities, that includes vehicles, that includes funner projects as well, and then a lot of infrastructure such as streets and the underground. So the next slide is just a quick recap of the major 2025 projects that might be more interesting to the public. We discussed 2nd Street reconstruction. We also have Lakeview Avenue in there. That would be in conjunction with the new childhood center, and that is coming from the general fund because it's not identified as a street trust fund. We've got Hunt Avenue that was projected to happen in 2025, our water augmentation plan, the Murphy Sewer Lift Station, the Master Stormwater Utility Infrastructure Plan, the downtown alleyway project, which is about a $3 million project, facility improvements and vehicles, a new solid waste shop, a Carroll Park, a dog park at Carroll Park, I'm sorry, a full wheelchair swing at Cole Park, levy engineering and maintenance, the CRHDC and Boyd School Housing, and then Early Childhood Education Center. And then on the last is just a summary of our grants throughout the years. You can see that we've definitely gone to a new level. We haven't sustained the 17 million, but we're still much higher than what I would have thought we would be. We also wanted to provide a 2024 breakdown of the grants. I think some topics we discuss are more controversial and get a lot of attention, but when you look at where the funding goes and where the grants go, it's not always lined up what gets mostly discussed in the community. So downtown is about 38% because of the alleyway grant. Housing is at 22%. It was 2023 that we got a lot of the major housing grants. The pass-through of the early childhood, public safety, parks and rec, and then miscellaneous IT, historic, et cetera. And with that, we've got first reading of the 2025 budget before you. And I'm available, as is staff, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Counselor Yanvihill?
Mayor, I just want to commend Heather and staff for all the work they've done on the budget the last few months. I know it's a lot of work and we appreciate it. I'd like to make a motion on first reading, ordinance number 24-2024, and set it for a public hearing on October 16th at 7 PM or soon thereafter.
Thank you. Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, first reading of ordinance number 25-2024, an ordinance amending the established pay plan for city officers and employees in accordance with Article 3, Section 11 of the Charter, and as referred to Section 15-2 of the Code of Ordinances concerning personnel rules and regulations and pay plans for the city officers and employees.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
As part of the budget preparation, what we needed to look at for the 10-year plan is what can the city afford from a cost of living adjustment as well as our pay for performance planning. And the city's policies as it relates to compensation discuss having the COLA be based on the 5-year average of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And so doing that calculation would equate to 4.2%, which is what was recommended in the budget. And the 10-year plan shows can be afforded. We also are able to afford up to a 4% merit increase for employees. Obviously, not every employee will get the 4%. You see kind of a bell curve of how that happens, which means then the actual budget impact for the COLA and the merit increase is a 7.2%. The COLA would shift the entire pay plan, and so that's why we need council to approve the new pay plan that puts in place that COLA. Additionally, there are a few seasonal positions or positions that don't show up in the pay plan that we do need to increase by 2.7% because the state minimum wage is going up. And so this ordinance would address those positions as well.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Yanvihill, please.
Mayor, I move that we approve on first reading ordinance number 25-2024 and set it for a public hearing on October 16th at 7 PM or soon thereafter.
Counselor Krebs?
I have a question. In your summary, you said the COLA was 4.2 with the raises, well, the secondary pay level also being around 4%.
The merit increase?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be 8.2 instead of 7.2. You had mentioned 7.2.
That's the budget impact is
Okay.
7.2.
Got it.
Because since not everybody gets that 4% merit,
Okay.
it's more of a bell curve. So it's usually a percentage less on how it impacts the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I second the motion, Mayor.
Thank you, Council Krebs. We have a motion, second. No further discussion. Please start voting. Ms. Martinez.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight by any council? Okay, don't see any committee reports. Okay, that brings us to staff announcements.
So as Harry makes his way up, I'll do two very quick ones. This is First Friday, and Dawn or Counselor Krebs and Harry will be, manning the city's table for Counselor Connections. And then not too far behind that, Saturday, October 12th is the farmer's market, and we had down Counselor Dominguez and Holly as volunteers for that. So we'll be connecting to make sure that still works for everyone's schedules. And Harry, if you want to talk about the SIDs.
So if you remember, earlier this year, we had a work session where we discussed the Stockton edition, kind of whether they're a good candidate for SID improvement. So staff brought all the information to you and we kind of rolled out the costs. Once you had a chance to look at that, it didn't look very feasible, but council wanted us to make sure that information was relayed back to the property owners. So we reached out to, I think, 37 property owners along Stockton, Foster, Chico, and Savage. And we set up 2 public meetings or meetings for those property owners to attend. And we kind of went through the same presentation we gave council, rolled out the costs. We only had 6 who attended between the 2 nights, but we had 4 more additional calls. But it was kind of a census that, it just doesn't make sense. Gave them kind of the roadmap of how to pursue it if they ever chose to, and also posted it online. So that information is online. If you get calls or questions, you can kind of show them where to go, or at least give them the rundown. If you want to refresh your memory, it's always there to kind of look over. But just overall, there wasn't any positive input or interest in moving forward. So just want to let you know we followed through with that, and certainly if you have any questions, send them our way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harry. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Any other staff? You got another one?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the last item on the agenda, council comments. Does anyone have any comments before we adjourn? Council Krebs?
I just want to thank city, is this thing on? Hello. I just want to thank city staff for all of their work on all of the public hearings and the ordinances and the resolutions that we heard tonight. That was a lot of work to shoehorn into one meeting, and I thought it was explained very well, and the details have been thought out, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other, Councilor Yanvio?
I should have asked this question when Harry was up here. Sorry, Harry. Have we, I know y'all are super busy, but have we reached out to the folks on Foster?
So yes, it included both the Stockton and the Foster
And
areas.
Foster, okay.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
yes.
Okay, all right. I want to thank the staff for all the energy and effort they put into the budget. Leanne, you and your team and the rest of departments heads and also the city manager, great job. And then I just want to give a big shout out to Beata for all of the work that she put into making sure that Velhagen clock got the much deserved attention that it did this past week downtown. So I want to tell her thank you as well. That's all I have. With that being said, this meeting is adjourned.